Toronto Raptors news has been coming in like crazy as of late, as we now have what we can expect in potential returns for Gary Trent Jr. and Chris Boucher if they were thrown up on the trade market, which it seems like is the case. We have an update on Gary Trent Jr.'s contract updates, as he is an unrestricted free agent this offseason. So some people are speculating maybe it makes sense to just bring him back. Also, we have multiple Bruce Brown updates as a new team has been revealed as a potential suitor, and Nic Claxton, who has long been coveted by Toronto Raptors fans, and apparently the Toronto Raptors front office. An NBA insider sort of discusses the potential possibility of him landing with the Toronto Raptors this offseason. So lots of stuff has been coming out regarding this Toronto Raptors team. If you want to stay up to date with it all, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Over 57% of our viewers are not subscribed. I mean, that number keeps growing up because you guys have been absolutely crushing it, checking out these vids, coming back to all the latest news. So I appreciate that. But with the new viewers rolling in, it would mean the world to me if you guys could hit that subscribe button, because we can keep you up to date with all the latest Toronto Raptors news. But let's dive into what's been going on, because Mike Scotto came on the Raptors show last night, and basically, or I listened to it last night, and had a lot to say regarding potential Toronto Raptors updates, and basically revealing a lot of news, particularly around current Toronto Raptors and all the things I discussed in the intro. So the first thing we'll take a look at is basically Chris Boucher and Gary Trent Jr.'s potential packaged returns, on this Raptors season, because again, Gary Trent Jr. is someone that Raptors fans viewed as someone with a lot of potential, being a younger player in the NBA, shooting over 40% from the three-point line. We traded Norman Powell for him, who's been putting up remarkable stats for the LA Clippers, and is just a guy that has sort of fallen out of favor week by week, slowly out of the Toronto Raptors sense, because he hasn't taken that leap, that massive step up. I mean, when we acquired him, some people were comparing him to Bradley Beal, and he just hasn't taken that leap. And this season, particularly with a little role change, particularly just even though he has been efficient from behind the three-point line, just kind of taking a step back in regards to his scoring. He never really improved his finishing around the basket. His midi is fine. He doesn't take as many of them this season, but he's a guy that just hasn't really taken that jump. And now, Toronto Raptors fans, this offseason, we expected an extension to get signed after a report came out from Chris Haynes that indicated that an extension was imminent. But now, we have an update on his potential future, because Gary Trent Jr. is a guy that apparently doesn't have any market whatsoever. No teams are really interested in Gary Trent Jr. here now at this point. Now, the trade deadline is still weeks away. I'm sure a shooter, if he gets, Masai Ujiri starts really selling them, putting them on the phones and things like that, a shooter shooting over 40% from the three-point line and has shown potential capabilities on the defensive end, still an expiring contract, so there's flexibility there. You're not locked into anything crazy. I mean, you get something back. And essentially, Mike Scotto said you might be able to get a couple seconds for him right now, but there isn't a serious market for Gary Trent Jr., and apparently Chris Boucher is the same way. Again, Boucher's role has been decreased an even more amount. He's older than Gary Trent Jr., so I'd be surprised if his market was that much greater out there in terms of what we could get in return, even though they were kind of talked about on equal footing. Scotto basically indicated that the Raptors wanted to get anything of substance back, probably packaging Boucher as well as Gary Trent Jr. together. You might be able to land something. So we'll keep our eyes out along those lines. I mean, again, if we're going to get nothing back for the guys, do we really trade them? Maybe a couple seconds would be cool. Increase your flexibility, increase your assets, in particularly the case of Chris Boucher. He's a guy that is going to be under contract for the next couple seasons, so if the Raptors want to have that flexibility, it might make sense to deal him away now. But I'm surprised, given the lack of market for Gary Trent Jr. and how effective he's been from the three-point line, that there's no discussions on contract talks. I mean, right now feels like a good time to buy low on Gary Trent, lock him into a reasonable contract over the course of the next few seasons. I mean, I don't know. Might be too high on Gary Trent Jr., but we are loaded at the guard positions. Masai's been raving about flexibility, so we'll see what ends up happening along those lines. But the Toronto Raptors have another sort of shooter, or not necessarily shooting guard on this team that has also been involved in a bunch of trade discussions, and that's Bruce Brown. So the first update we'll give is, obviously, a report came out a couple days ago regarding the Miami Heat having interest in Bruce Brown. Then they ended up making the Terry Rozier trade, and while that's still a possibility, the interest still might be there, the fit, according to Mike Scotto, just isn't as necessary following that Terry Rozier trade, even though I'd argue that bringing in Rozier, he's a solid defender, but not great. He's a bucket getter. Having sort of complementary role piece like Bruce Brown kind of makes more sense, but they'd have to give up more draft capital, which might be a risk for this Miami Heat team. So there's less interest there, even though the chatter might still end up happening with the Miami Heat. But the Dallas Mavericks are a team that hasn't really been talked about, that are significantly interested in Bruce Brown. They view him as a very solid fit with that group. And again, we heard the Dallas Mavericks' interest in Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby, but obviously the price would have been too high from what the Dallas Mavericks could offer. Maybe now the asking price could fit what the Dallas Mavericks actually could deliver to a team like the Toronto Raptors. And frankly, I know the Dallas Mavericks have Luka Doncic, but given the unpredictability of Kyrie Irving in terms of availability, whether it be with injuries or just off the court stuff, regardless of what you think of his off the court antics or things like that, he has been inconsistent on the court. So it might not be a bad thing to sort of take a few flyers on some unprotected Dallas Mavericks picks in the future, especially if Luka Doncic ends up leaving. We heard trade chatter about Luka Doncic potentially asking out or leaving Dallas if they don't sort of clean things up for this season. So, a future Dallas Mavericks first round pick along with a younger guy on that roster. Again, we're not getting lively, just anytime I mention him, Dallas Mavericks fans come into our comment section. Not that many, but say that you're delusional for thinking you get lively. So I won't throw his name out there too much. But again, Bruce Brown would be a serious fit for the Dallas Mavericks to provide some defense because they have a offensive nuclear scoring power with Luka and Kyrie when they're healthy, when they're out there on the court together. So I wouldn't mind one of their lottery picks, even though probably can get something better. The Lakers reportedly still have interest in Bruce Brown. Again, all coming from Mike Escato. So Bruce Brown's market is serious. It's there, but I feel like Masai Ujiri probably shouldn't wait if there are proper offers out there on the table, in my opinion, because deals are happening. We saw it with the Terry Rozier move. People are not hesitating, especially with the Raptors made their moves like a month ahead of this year's trade deadline. People are not hesitating to sort of cash in their chips and fit their sort of roster moves. So, I mean, if we're trading Bruce Brown, and again, if we think he's a fit long term, then maybe it makes sense to keep him. I wouldn't mind making this deal happen sooner rather than later. But the final thing that we're discussing in this video is Nic Claxton, who is a guy that, again, a couple seasons ago, we heard rumors that Chris Boucher, Nic Claxton swap could potentially go down. Then we heard about Pascal Siakam, Brooklyn trade rumors last midway through last year, and now Claxton could be coming to the Toronto Raptors and all those types of things. So Claxton's been long linked to the Toronto Raptors. And now this offseason, he's an unrestricted free agent. So the Raptors, it's free game for this team to potentially acquire Nic Claxton. Now, it's unlikely he'd ever sign here if Poeltl is still on the roster, but nothing's stopping the Toronto Raptors from dealing away Poeltl if they think, Nic Claxton's sort of a fit. I've seen some people talk about how, hey, Nic Claxton's not a great shooter. He's not a guy that's going to floor space or anything like that. So why would we really want him? Well, again, there's two ways you could sort of really open up the court for your team. And obviously one of them is floor spacing, and not a lot of effective defensive centers are great at floor spacing. And obviously Claxton is a monster blocking shots at the rim. Is a really strong rim protector for the Brooklyn Nets, but you can also do it by being a lob threat because, again, Poeltl's a guy that's a big target, and he's an effective pick and roll player because he can dive to the rim. He's a smart basketball player, but you can't really throw crazy lobs to Jakob Poeltl. He's not going to go up there and catch it. Whereas a smaller guard like a Emmanuel Quickly, if he's running a pick and roll sort of with a Nic Claxton, the same way he used to do with Mitchell Robinson in New York, he's making those dives, he's cutting around those corners, right? Throwing that lob threat up to Nic Claxton could be huge. And again, not floor spacing in the sense, but being a guy that commands gravity out there on the basketball court could be a huge plus for this Toronto Raptors team. I mean, Scotty Barnes, the way he's been hitting Thad Young as of late too, with the sort of unlocked floor, it would be a really cool fit. So what did Mike Scotto say about Nic Claxton's future? And again, he said there's always a little bit of chatter, but he specifically mentioned how the Nets, it's unlikely he'd leave given the fact the Nets can offer him an extra year on the contract. Personally, I don't think Nic Claxton's going to command a max deal in free agency, so it's unlikely that he's going to have those types of numbers in terms of the millions that's competitive with the Brooklyn Nets. So if the Raptors can carve out a fit, I think Nic Claxton would be an awesome fit for this team if we can steal him away from the Brooklyn Nets. Probably be the biggest free agent signing that wasn't already on the Toronto Raptors group in Raptors history. So we'll see if it could potentially go down. Keep your eyes peeled for those type of rumors and things like that. But you guys have listening this far. Subscribe to the channel if you guys haven't already. Anyways, I'm signing out. Cheers.